Okay, gang, let's move on to Hillocks Chapter 3, what I like to call, or okay, this is something I care about chapter. And I will try not to rant about the kinds of research papers I see assigned in middle school and high school classrooms. I told you about the student I saw recently who had as a topic gun control. And, well, let's move on before I break my promise about ranting. I love this chapter of Hillocks because he does what we have talked about. He connects a writing project to the lives of his students. So let's dive in. Hillocks is spot on when he describes how student essays devolve into a summary of sources as opposed to a substantive argument for, well, anything. The problem isn't always the students. It can be that the assignments don't ask students to collect or interpret data. Arguments of policy, according to Hillocks, are about rules, procedures, practices, or projects, establishing them, amending them, or eliminating them. But the topics students choose or teachers assign offer no opportunity for real or relevant research. You'll note that Hillocks comments on the crappy death penalty papers his pal received. And tell me that it doesn't sound like stuff you saw or maybe even wrote in high school. What is missing is the collection and interpretation of original data. Notice interpretation. That's a higher order thinking skill, and that is what we need to develop in students. On page 68, Hillocks lists problems with the kinds of research students are typically asked to do, and even though the Common Core state standards seem to suggest more inquiry-type tasks, answer a question or solve a problem, for example, that is not what students are being asked to do. Rather, their research remains take a side, find evidence from bullshit sources, summarize that evidence, and write a paper. Even the assignment by my beloved Taylor Molly in the Like Lily video is a shitty assignment. You'll remember it was about same-sex marriage or something like that. The challenge with issues of policy is finding those topics that interest students. That's why Hillocks suggests starting with the world students inhabit. The chewing gum activity is a terrific model because it has all the elements we want in such a writing project. It's a subject related to the lives of students. There are multiple opportunities for primary and secondary research. And the thing is, getting students to conduct experiments, to interview people, to create surveys or questionnaires, to understand sampling, these are real-world job skills. In addition, students looked up stuff like cleaning techniques. They asked a doctor about germs, but that could just as easily have been more traditional secondary research. Plus, there's a real problem at issue and a real solution to be proposed in the assignment. The end product is authentic and written to an actual audience. Now, the components or the elements of the final product on pages 74 and 75 are not the elements of a typical comp class essay. Remember, with the new Colorado academic standards, the what is not at issue. That is, the document students produce, as much as the skills they master in the process of creating that product. More importantly, think about it. Outside of school, when will students be asked to produce a traditional essay? They will, however, be asked to conduct research, analyze that research, arrive at findings, and present those findings. In a later chapter, Hillock will connect all of his instruction to students' literary essays, so he'll satisfy the English major in all of us. However, as you think about literature-based assignments, I want you to expand your definition of assignments. And I haven't even mentioned the numeracy involved in this assignment. Anyway, we've looked at arguments of fact and arguments of judgment, and so here Hillocks moves us on to simple arguments of policy. And as with so much of what this book does, the key is to start with something small and build skills so that students can move on to more sophisticated tasks. In this case, to more complex and complicated arguments. What Hillocks is doing in the assignment he shares about chewing gum is allowing students to see how argument progresses, and that'll become clear later in the chapter when he gives you the list of the kinds of claim, data, and warrant that has been done at each level of the actual assignment. Now remember, Hillocks' criteria for a researchable problem is pretty simple, something about which students care, or something ripe for primary as well as secondary research. Again, I love that this project incorporates both of those. Let's take a look at the steps of the assignment as they are laid out in the chapter. It begins with identify and clarify the problem. Think about the value of starting with school-based topics. Primary sources are all around, from a written policy to people to interview. In addition, students have something at stake. They have skin in the game. Will they all care? Maybe not, but most of them will. Notice that for the gum example, the process of defining the problem involves some of our invention strategies, as students arrive at questions about their topic that they can use to help them begin their research. Research in the real world is not limited to the library or the internet. As students think about how they will organize their research and what they need to find out, they begin to consider how they will gather the data they need. Look at the various tools and strategies for primary research students learn. Data collection via surveys, data collection via their own gum-based research, interviews. It's all manner of really practical, real-world research skills. There is room in this project for secondary research. That is the kind of library/internet stuff that composes most research projects. Think about some of these. They could find out the composition of most gum. They could supplement an interview with a peer's Dr. Dad with something from an article about germs. The point is, authentic research involves some combination of primary and secondary sources. And that's not what we're seeing in the typical high school or middle school research paper. You'll note that the chapter titles Step 4 as Introducing Arguments of Policy. But I think it is more about the way students organize their research into an appropriate format. Note that their teacher identifies the text structures of the argument of policy, the expectations. So she engages students in a discussion of format. That format functions in the subsequent pages the way an outline does is important because it guides students as they write up the results of their research. But what is missing from her description of what they are doing as part of their pre-writing are a few things. Notice that the elements of the rhetorical triangle that I tout are not really addressed in any formal manner, and I think that's a mistake. So I want you, as an assignment related to this chapter that you'll have to submit and you'll know about because you're listening, I want you to make me a rhetorical triangle with notes at each corner, as well as the center, the text being created, and the context, that is the circle that surrounds the triangle. You can use the sheets I provided or I made or I showed you, whatever it is. But the point is, I want you to think about how this assignment can be, I think, made better by thinking about the rhetorical triangle. So that's an assignment that you have to do. So take a second to do that and bring it to me in class, and then go on to the Hillocks Chapter 3, Chat number 2. Okay, that's enough for this one.